You guys ask me all the time, what's the best way to start recording gameplay and making videos, and so today, I wanted to give you a heads up that for a limited time, there is a huge sale going on Elgato products as part of Amazon Prime Day. I've got a link in the description down below. There's like over $500 of discounts in the US alone across their range of stuff. I use their green screen, I use their 4K 60 Pro capture card, I use their HD60S capture card, I used to use the HD60 capture card. I've used their stuff forever, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So if you want a sale on Elgato gear, the sale's on right now. Link in the description down below. When my team finished the Origins Easter egg in 2013 for the first time, we sat back, the cutscene began to play, and we had our minds blown. It was something that we had never seen before in zombies, and it was completely out of left field. Nobody was expecting that kind of ending. And since 2013, there have been theories and ideas about the different components of that cutscene and what they all mean. And so in this video, what I'm gonna do is play you the full cutscene now so you can check it out for yourself and just get an idea in your head of what you think is going on here. And then we're going to talk about a new perspective offered by Alpha Omega that we can use to change the way we view that Origins cutscene and maybe get a bit of a better idea of what's actually going on. So I'll play the cutscene for you now. Enjoy.
As the gates to Agartha opened, the four heroes were rewarded with riches beyond imagination. From that day forward, they knew that Samantha would keep them safe. Forever.
You're getting everything wrong. I told you before their eyes should be blue.
It's my turn, Eddie. I can do whatever I want.
But you don't even know how to play properly. Girls don't know enough about zombies.
Put some toys away, children. Make sure the windows are locked before you come down to the basement.
We'd better do what your dad says. I didn't even get my turn.
Tomorrow, Eddie. You get to make the rules. I promise. Come on, Fluffy.
I wish the heroes in our stories were real, Sam.
I know what you mean. But we will make everything okay. My dad says he has a plan.
The first thing we notice is that right now, there are only two kids in the house. Samantha, American version, and Eddie, American version. They're playing with figurines. Samantha is holding Nikolai Belinsky, funnily enough, but the Ultimus version, not the Primus versions, obviously. And you've also got a Panzer in there, you've got a jug bottle, and various other bits and bobs from the zombies kind of canon. You also have the Victus crew figures under the bed, which we'll see in just a moment. I think you can actually see Stu is holding a ray gun Mark II there as well. So the kids themselves are one core detail we need to keep an eye on here. The other detail that I want to really focus on is what Maxis does in this cutscene. So he's talking over the intercom, which at the time when this came out was kind of like a pet theory that I was working with about Maxis only ever talking over electricity and how there was that weird thing with him just constantly being on intercoms and stuff like that. That kind of ended up being a vindicated theory when the timeline told us that he learned to merge with electricity in the crazy place or something ridiculous like that. That was definitely odd vindication to get at the time, but now that Purnell's done it with being the Avogadro and Alpha Omega, it's a little bit less weird, I guess. But anyway, Maxis speaks to them, but not before a siren goes off. And the first thing the kids do when they hear it is look towards the window. Let's talk about why the kids got to the house here in the first place. Eddie's soul was taken from Dimension 2210 by Richtofen, something that we've never seen in zombies. It's just in the timeline. We got told that it happened. And Samantha gets to the house after Maxis gets there. Like, you guys might remember in like Der Eisen, I believe, in Black Ops 3, there are quotes where it's like, yes, Maxis was the first, and it's actually confirmed in the timeline. He was the first to the house, didn't have a soul, but Monty still managed to make him a body, which was a manifestation of his Dimension 63 form. This is a bit of a double-edged sword. It's not just giving Maxis new life almost, because Monty also wipes the Maxises across the multiverse that were corrupted by the Dark Ether from existence. They're gone. Those corrupted versions include the Maxis from Black Ops 2, who we basically went on a quest for, building all the pyramids, what am I saying, pylons, and then getting the Maxis endgame activated in Buried. And it's that very Maxis that in Buried, when he gets control of the ether, goes back to the moon where Richtofen, Ultimus Richtofen that is inside the MPD, but his body is left outside the MPD because he's done a swole swap. That's wrong. A soul swap with Samantha, and so Samantha as a life force, as a soul, is in Richtofen's body. But Dark Ether Maxis, who's completed Buried, nabs Samantha's soul. Richtofen's just left there, and then classified stuff happens, etc. And then Monty brings that Samantha from Agartha back to the house. Okay, so we're caught up to this point. The Samantha that was on the moon would have been German Samantha, because she's saying, "I will rip your innards from your insides." What sort of accent was that? That was not German. She's German anyway, and she's saying all that crazy stuff, and then she goes to Agartha. That version of Samantha in Agartha is American at that point, and then she goes to the house, and in the house, wearing her, like, pajamas, she seems to be American as well. Now, one thing that does happen when she gets there is that Monty says, "Oh, nope, you're still corrupted by the Dark Ether," because she previously, if you step back in time just a second ago, was one of the people that was inside the MPD. She was controlling the zombies, saying, "I'm gonna rip your innards from your insides," right? So Monty sees that corruption and says, "We need to get rid of that." So he takes her away from the house and then brings her back to the house. And I think that's what we're seeing in that one Chronicles story trailer where she disappears and then comes back into the room. I think that that is the innocence of Samantha being restored, most likely. There are definitely some other details here where Samantha comes back and she has definitely been changed. She seems to be like screaming Monty's name or something. There's stuff related to that I could talk about in another video if you guys want. But the long and short of it is that it's at that point where the whole quest spins up to get the Chronorium and the summoning key and all that jazz, and then we eventually get the arrival of Edward after Richtofen secures that soul from Dimension 2210, because he doesn't have a soul. Then we finally get to the part of this video that relates to Alpha Omega. Sorry, this is kind of confusing, it's just the way zombies is these days. The timeline reads as follows. The souls arrive, Maxis tells Samantha and Eddie to put the toys away and to make sure the windows are locked before they come down to the basement. Sounds very much like that Origins ending, doesn't it? And then the children reborn. As each soul arrives, Monty transforms them into their younger selves and returns their innocence. That is something that we have seen. We see Nikolai, Dempsey, and Takio all shooting up into the air after the end of Grod Krovi. That is when their transfer happens, and Monty then receives each soul in turn and kind of converts it to child form. Then in Rev, we see all the kids in the house and all that stuff, and even in the comic, we see the Victus crew in the house, which is a little peculiar, but something we'll talk about another day. But that's all fine, right? Max is telling the kids to come down is explained. The kids being there, those two being there, is explained. We're sort of fine, we're on good terms. But then Alpha Omega comes along and our perspective of all of this changes a bit, which is really cool because all of the previous stuff still applies, but we now have a new lens to look through all of this with, which is just I love it. So in Alpha Omega, we've broken off from the regular cycle, right? We've got to a point where we're actually going on a separate path now that doesn't follow the events of the timeline. And so while there will be some overlap with certain things, other things will deviate. The early history of Samantha, for example, will be the same. So Samantha will start German, she'll be on the moon, then she'll end up American when she's calling out in Origins to the characters, the Primus characters from Agartha. Then she's gonna stay American when she gets to the house, or maybe she's gonna go German and then be cleansed and become American again. I'll talk about that again in a minute. And then Eddie's gonna get there as well from 2210, and that's fine. But in this new offshoot of the timeline, Takio, Dempsey, and Nikolai don't get there. Those three characters just never arrive at the house because Richtofen never sends them there at the end of Gorod, and Nikolai's soul doesn't even get collected. So in this offshoot, Tank and Takio are both in the summoning key with the Shadow Man, which is pretty wild. And that version of Nikolai still has his soul. That 1.0 hasn't had his soul claimed, which means that Primus Nikolai also still has his soul, because there's kind of a thing where once you get that one soul specifically, the others can just get deleted from all multiverses, and that's that. So that explains, for example, why in the Alpha Omega end cutscene, we don't see a load of other children being sent back from the house, because we didn't get to that point in the story yet. We didn't get to Gorod, and that's why Maxis in Alpha Omega keeps saying on the radios, like, my timing of things says that you should have got us the souls by now. What's going on? Monty is starting to get suspicious. So, speaking of those kids, we have a puzzle piece here, the Alpha Omega cutscene, where Samantha and Eddie are in a teleporter, and then they leave, and Monty finds out what's happening and comes and says, hold on a minute, you've been a naughty boy, Maxis, and kills him. But the beauty of this is that the Origins cutscene still, as far as I can tell, applies to this just as much as it applied back during the previous cycle events that we were talking about inside the timeline and during Black Ops 3. The fact that a siren goes off, the kids look a little bit alarmed, Maxis tells them to lock the windows and come down to the basement, just like he would do if other people were arriving from the teleporter, except now his plan is to send the kids away in the teleporter, and that's then when Monty comes down the stairs and sees everything happening right at the last second. Then they would teleport out from that Origins cutscene house area, and they'd end up in Alpha Omega. The question then, though, is why is there this switch going on between German and American Sam? It's a bit bizarre, right? Well, I think you can make a bit of an argument for this in the following way. I think that there is a good chance that true Samantha, core Samantha, is German. After all, that's what we know of her origin story. We don't know of an American Samantha. That's just not a thing as far as we're concerned, but she's definitely around. She's present all the time. So if we say that German Samantha is our baseline, then what seems to happen is she goes all the way through to Moon. She touches the MPD, and then she soul swaps with Richtofen and stays German. So the MPD doesn't really affect Samantha necessarily in terms of changing her accent. It's only when she is plucked from Richtofen's body and ends up in Agartha that she suddenly sounds American, and then in the house sounds American. This could be because Agartha is this realm that Monty is essentially kind of dominant over. He is the top of the food chain, as I keep saying in these videos, and he's trying to protect that and maintain it at all costs. We could imagine that while Samantha is in Agartha, Monty kind of has a little bit more control over her form, over how she manifests, and so maybe it's Monty that gives her that American form. That would kind of make sense as well, because then in the house, what form is she in? Her American version. And that's the one that Monty restores the innocence of, so that is definitely the one that Monty has basically curated and said this is the proper version of Samantha, if you will. This is an idea that I quite like. I think that it fits fairly well. There is actually an extra wrinkle of this that I think is worth mentioning because it kind of bolsters the idea. In the timeline, it says that Samantha is brought to the house and reunited with her Dimension 63 incarnation of her father, but she isn't given a body there. Like, she doesn't get a new body as it says with Maxis, and so she would have a form when she was previously in Agartha before Monty brought her to the house. And so it lines up with exactly that idea that I've just stated, that maybe that was when Monty gave her that body and it was the American version. Then anyway, we fast forward, we get to the end of the Origins cutscene, she's still American, and then she teleports to Alpha Omega, and suddenly our girl Samantha is German again. What's going on there? Well, at that point, she has broken out of the malaise that she would have been in inside the house, trapped, essentially, almost held prisoner in the control of Dr. Monty. And so it would make sense to me, I think that it's a justifiable idea to say that now that she has broken out of those shackles and she is hell-bent again on getting back to wiping Monty, the Keepers, the Apothicons, all of it from all of time itself, she would go back to more in her German direction from when she was in the MPD, prior to all of this Agartha stuff happening in the first place. It's almost like, in Zombies, the dark ether is not actually that dark, and actually it's Agartha that is the corrupting influence that ruins everyone. The dark ether itself has some negative characteristics as well, I'm sure, but because the timeline is very much in the framework of Monty's vision of how the universe should be, there are certain things in there that I think we need to push back against, and one of those things is that Monty basically says to us that everything that is Apothicon is evil, and everything that is Keeper and therefore associated with him is good. I've made a whole video on the lies of Dr. Monty. You can check it out if you want to. I'll have it linked in the description down below. That goes into a lot of depth with this idea, but I wanted to bring it up here as well because I think it's still relevant. I'm also now going to jump in post to give you even more evidence to back up my theory here, because I just found some more. So if we look at the Alpha Omega intro, one of the things that we see is Samantha clearly finding powers that we have never seen her finding before and blasting a huge beam of energy into the sky to attack this massive hulking Apothecon creature. Now, this is something that I actually depicted in my Great War posters and t-shirts, which are available right now for a limited time via the description down below. Don't miss out on those. But you'll notice that the clothing she is wearing here, in this liberated form that she is in, where she is finally realizing the true power inside her, where she is finally outside the house as well, outside the clutches of Monty, is her German outfit. It's not her American pajamas thing that Monty gives her. It's the German one right from back on Moon when we first saw her rise out of the MPD. And you could make the argument here, yes, that, of course, when she's outside the house, she isn't wearing her pajamas, but the symbolism of what we're being shown, Samantha floating above this MPD later in the trailer as well, with her yellow eyes glowing. That's the same yellow eye glow that we see at the end of the Alpha Omega cutscene when she goes German again, right? There is some real symbolism being portrayed here, and I feel like the Treyarch story team are really trying to illustrate the fact that Samantha Freed is a Samantha in her German form, and is also a Samantha to be reckoned with. This even goes further. If we look at this trailer, you remember this scene where Dr. Monty's in the basement with the kids? They're all looking absolutely terrified, and Samantha is there, separated from the rest of the pack. For some reason, she's being singled out a little bit here in the cinematography and the way they're presenting this scene, and she's looking out of the window, staring, and then it transitions over and we see the summoning key. This is a fantastic trailer, by the way. Like, it's so good the way they've crafted this and put it together. But the relevant thing here, I think, is that if we go like full English literature GCSE, writing an essay style, analyzing what's happening, the messaging that I'm getting here from this is that Samantha is gazing out of the window almost at the life that she could have, at the world outside the house that she is innocent to at that point, because Samantha has been cleansed by Dr. Monty, so she doesn't know the half of what's going on outside, but she is gazing with a longing that she doesn't know why she has, and wondering, what else is there out there? And who else could I be if I wasn't in this confined and suffocating house that prevents me from even reaching my true potential or even thinking about my true potential? The summoning key is a depiction of that in itself. It's a keeper artifact, one of the most powerful in all of creation. And no, I don't think that she is literally gazing out of the window at the key, but the imagery being presented is meant to make us think about those sorts of themes. This is why I love the director's cut trailers so much, because they give us so much food for thought with this sort of stuff. There's also the DE drawing in Samantha's room where she was visited in the night by a keeper, the very same species of weird alien monster that she seems to be basically replicating the actions of by firing this massive beam into the sky. Sounds like the sort of thing that maybe Monty would want to cleanse her of, because it's power that he can't necessarily control and he wants to keep her under his thumb. So Samantha, German, gets out at the end of Alpha Omega. She's really angry now. And the interesting thing, the question that I think a lot of people aren't talking about so much, is what's the deal with Eddie? The way it's kind of framed makes it seem like Samantha is definitely like the big sister in this relationship, and that wasn't really the vibe that we got in Origins in the end cutscene, which is interesting. But anyway, Eddie doesn't speak. We don't know if Eddie has a German form and an English form or an American form or what. It's kind of a mystery right now. And the reason I think that it's worth some discussion is because the original form of where that Eddie came from is still a mystery. Dimension 2210 is not something we understand in the slightest as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm very curious to see if we go into this next map, wherever it might be, if it's the Great War or somewhere else, and if Eddie is a German version of himself, his actual young self, whose parents, I guess, would have just died, rest in peace, and he would then grow up to go on to Heidelberg, in theory, as part of Primus, or if it's going to be an entirely different version of Eddie, like an Ultimus Eddie kid, or a different one entirely that we just have never seen before. I don't know what direction they're going to take his character in, but I do know that the conclusion we can come to here is that that Origins end cutscene from 2013, so long ago, fitted into the story then, and they made it work then, and to this day, fits into the new story now, as well as the old stuff, just with a slightly different perspective on the events events that have actually taken place. I think that's really cool. I think that there's some symmetry there that is really to be respected on the part of Treyarch and the work that they've done in crafting that. I think that it's great. There's a load of other stuff to do with the house that we don't have answers for and that are big question marks, and I would love to make more videos about those. So if you want more story videos on that kind of topic, let me know in the comments down below. On screen, I'll have some more story videos for you to click. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna get to editing this now because I'm exhausted. That's been a lot of talking about the zombie story. Woo! Thanks for watching, guys. I've been MrRoflWaffles. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.